Welcome to the Grayzone. It's Max Blumenthal. The Ansarallah movement controls the majority of Yemen after fending off a brutal US and UK backed military campaign led by Saudi Arabia. After Israel began its blood-stained assault on the besieged Gaza Strip this October, Ansarallah, known popularly as the Houthis, enacted a naval blockade targeting Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea as a means of putting pressure on Israel to end its attack on Gaza. The Biden administration responded with attacks of its own, striking targets across Yemen.
Yemen working. Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Just days before the Biden administration announced plans to add Ansarallah once again to the State Department's list of terrorist organizations and issued its intent to escalate military attacks on Yemen, I spoke to Mohammed Al-Bukhaiti, a senior political officer and spokesman for the Ansarallah movement. Mohammed Al-Bukhaiti, welcome to the Grayzone. What are your military objectives with this naval blockade in the Red Sea, and how do you intend to achieve them against some of the most powerful militaries on the planet?
In the name of God, the All-Merciful, our goal is a simple one: to stop the genocide that is happening in Gaza, and to help get fuel, food, and medicine into Gaza. And we have suffered a similar plight starting in 2015 till today as the Yemeni people. We suffered equally from strikes and a siege. That's why we cannot allow these crimes to be repeated. And of course, if any other group had been suffering what the Palestinians are suffering now, we would have equally supported them. Therefore, our position is a moral one, and our war is a war of morality. As for the massive difference in military strength between Yemen and our enemies Israel, the United States, and the United Kingdom, we don't act based on our internal strength, but rather based on the support of God the Almighty. And everyone knows that Moses, peace be upon him, had triumphed over Pharaoh with a stick. As we know the story of Suleiman's victory, and the story of David's slingshot that defeated Goliath. Therefore, we don't fear but God Almighty, and we don't fear the weapons of the enemy, whatever they may be.
You've said the awareness battle is more important than the military one. What did you mean by that?
This war that we are currently waging has a special nature. The moral impact of this war is much more important than a militaristic one. That is why we believe that a victory on the awareness front is much more important than a military victory, because the main cause of suffering from wars around the world is a result of a lack of awareness. And we know that there are a lot of good people in this world, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and any other European country. These good people, if they found out the truth, their positions would change. I, for one, lived in the Netherlands for 7 years and was a member of the Dutch Socialist Party, where I was an activist for the Palestinian cause. I also lived in Canada. That is why I know that there is a lot of good in these Western countries and communities. The problem we run into as people trying to achieve justice in this world is the lack of unity and coordination between each other, fear in our spirits, and the lack of awareness amongst the masses. That is why we believe that Yemen's victory in this battle is a victory for morality and the highest values.
The Houthi movement slogan is "God is great, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam." Right now, there are hundreds of thousands of people across the West, Christians and Jews, who support what you're doing to put pressure on Israel to end this brutal assault on the Gaza Strip. So how do you square your slogan with the support that you're receiving from Christians and Jews across the West? And what is your message to the people who are out there protesting right now against Israel's attack on Yemen?
First of all, this slogan was written in January of 2002, during the American invasion of Afghanistan, during which America committed numerous crimes against the people of Afghanistan. Therefore, that slogan was a reaction against these crimes, and a response to Bush's slogan, "If you are not with us, you are against us," and his slogans in which he evoked the language of a modern-day crusade against Islam. So when Sayyid Hussein Badruddin al-Houthi launched this slogan, he said that its goal was to kill the fear within our spirits. This slogan is not a call for the murder of American citizens, nor for the killing of the Jews, but an expression of anger against the foreign policy of the United States and the West in general. The call was against the governing elites who ran these countries and occupied Washington and London. And this is well known amongst all the members of Ansarallah. I personally escorted a number of American journalists to Sada in the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. And as we were walking around the city, people recognized me. When they saw the foreigners with me, they would ask about them and ask where they came from. I would tell them that they're American. They would get surprised, of course, but tell me to welcome them. They would add that they are not against the American people, but rather the American government and its destructive foreign policy. The slogan was also used as a reaction to the Iraq invasion, an invasion that brought about such tragedy. As for the curse the Jews line, this exists in the Quran, the Bible, and the Torah. And I think the translation is more accurately damn than curse. And the idea behind this word comes back to a big problem. That there is a sanctification of the Jews and Judaism in Western world. Not only to repay the Jews for the crimes of Hitler and the Nazis and the other European powers, the sanctification is also happening to justify the Jewish oppression of the Palestinians and to strip the Palestinians of their rights. That's why we notice that any movement in the Western world in support of Palestinian rights is always countered with evocation of the Holocaust in Germany. Therefore, the aim of the slogan is quite simple: to kill the fear within one's spirit, as we say in Yemen. To break the barrier of fear for others as well. While we emphasize again that this slogan is not a call for the murder of the American or the Jewish people. Even though America, the United Kingdom, and Israel have killed millions of Muslims and Arabs, they did so either directly or by spreading discord or by backing corrupt Arab governments and making these governments fight one another, like what happened in Iran in 1980 and what happened in Yemen in 2015.
You've said that you're happy that the United States and UK are attacking Yemen directly rather than doing it through a proxy like Saudi Arabia. What did you mean by that?
The United States and the United Kingdom pushed Saudi Arabia and the UAE to wage war against us. They also pushed many Yemenis to fight amongst each other. Therefore, this war cost us a lot, as it was both an internal and a regional war. And it was a war against the interests of both the Yemeni people and the UAE and Saudi Arabia. It was a war for the interests of America, the United Kingdom, and Israel. In fact, the US benefited greatly by selling weapons. That is why we prefer the direct confrontation, with the United States and the United Kingdom over the indirect war with their agents in Yemen or their allies in the region. And this is reasonable, because the Yemeni people have now united in the face of this new aggression. Add to that the fact that the Muslim and Arab people stand with us. The people of these countries, and even people in the United States and the United Kingdom, are equally standing with us. Whatever sacrifices we give now, it will not come close to what we lost during that internal war. Finally, the indirect war was much more ruthless and difficult than this new direct war.
In 2019, as Saudi Arabia continued to wage war on and besiege Yemen, Ansarallah attacked Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure. Doing something like that right now would bring the global economy to its knees or make significantly greater impact than just simply blockading certain shipping in the Red Sea. So why has Ansarallah not returned to that tactic? Does it have something to do with this new relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is eager to negotiate with Yemen? Or is there another reason?
The aim from those attacks that targeted the Saudi gas pipelines was to force Saudi Arabia to stop waging war on Yemen and to retreat its forces from Yemen. Therefore, at that point, both the Saudis and the Emiratis realized that continuing the war in Yemen was no longer in their interests, and stopping the war became a joint aim in the region for both the Yemenis, the Saudis, and Emiratis. At that time, there was a Saudi and Emirati push for peace. Unfortunately, however, American pressure on the Saudi and Emirati governments led to a failure of the peace process. So the ceasefire ended, and we entered a phase of reduced escalation. Today, we don't have a ceasefire, just a reduced escalation status quo. For us, we always make sure that the military option is the last choice we use after exhausting all other options to make peace. That's why we hope that Saudi Arabia and the Emirates re-engage in the peace talks in order to achieve the points already agreed upon. We hope they do that without hesitation, as this might work against them, especially if the war expands. We are also closely monitoring the extent to which Saudi Arabia is aiding the US and the UK in their new war against us. And we emphasize, once more, that any Saudi or Emirati aid to the US and UK in their attacks against us will lead to a direct response against Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
The US government says that Ansarallah is controlled by Iran. They say that Iran or the IRGC guided your decision to blockade shipping in the Red Sea. So how do you respond to that? And how would you characterize Ansarallah's real relationship with the Iranian government and the IRGC?
There are crimes of genocide happening in Gaza, and there's a siege that aims to starve the people of Gaza. Therefore, a question begs itself. What is required of the nations of the world? The nations of the world must act to stop these crimes. America's accusation that our actions are directed by Iran is an attempt to distract global public opinion from the main crime of genocide in Gaza. These accusations are also irrational and baseless, because these crimes of genocide are taking place in Gaza. They are not taking place in Tehran or Isfahan. Iran's stance is a moral one, because Iran is equally seeking to stop these crimes. Therefore, the accusation that Iran is moving all those morally opposed to the Israeli crimes is actually a great compliment to Iran, as if Iran is the only country with any virtuous values or noble humanitarian goals. We assure everyone that our decisions in Yemen are independent. The decisions of Palestinian resistance movements is also independent. The decisions of Hezbollah are also independent. While it is true that what unites us is a similar goal, to liberate Palestine, to end American hegemony in the Middle East, and to liberate the world from the gang of Zionist leaders that seeks total domination of the world. Every country has its own independent decision. Also, if we had relinquished our decision-making to Iran, I would assure you that Yemen would have not chosen to directly confront the Zionist entity, nor to confront the direct aggression of the US and the UK.
There has been a deliberate plot by the West to divide Yemen over the past several decades. And we saw throughout the civil war that you waged that countries like the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia would come in and sponsor political parties to further divide the country. How are Yemenis, including those outside Ansarallah, responding to your campaign, your military campaign against Israel? And is this promoting more unity across a country the West has sought to divide for so long?
Certainly. The crimes of genocide in Gaza has woken up the conscience of the world, not just the Muslims and the Arabs. That's why our actions in support of Gaza have satisfied all the people of Yemen, including those who were fighting us on the front lines. I also add that the US and the UK strikes on Yemen strengthened the national unity and increased the global sympathy towards both the Palestinian and Yemeni people. That's why I think that the US President Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's decision to wage war on Yemen is an immoral and unjustified decision, and a decision that is not in the interests of the United States or the United Kingdom. Biden and Sunak took that decision for electoral reasons and not for strategic ones. Yemen won the first battle round for the awareness in this war from the first engagement. There will be a lot of shifts in the near future in both Yemen and the broader region, because this war has become clear for all. A war between right and wrong, a war between good and evil, a war between the defenders of the weak and the defenders of those who commit genocide. That's why the losses of the United States and the United Kingdom will be massive, and not only in the short run, but also in the long run.
To this point, how much damage, material damage and damage to your military capacity have the US and UK airstrikes achieved? And do you think they can actually prevent you from continuing these operations?
The US and UK strikes were inconsequential because Yemen was ready for such a confrontation. Also remember that Yemen had been in a state of war with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, both of whom used American and British weapons. They received logistical support from American and Israeli experts in target selection, intelligence gathering, and information systems. Therefore, the UK and US entering the war didn't bring anything new for us. That's why we assure that Yemen was not damaged when it came to its military forces. Rather, some military bases were targeted, which led to the martyrdom of 5 members of the armed forces.
In closing, what is your message to the Arab population living outside Yemen, especially those living in countries that have made deals with Israel or who have issued some interest in normalizing relations with Israel?
My message to the Arab people is that I am confident that Yemen will continue its operations against the Zionist entity. It will continue until the genocide comes to a stop and the siege is lifted, whatever sacrifices we have to make. In a normal world, it would be expected of the Arab people to sympathize with the Yemeni people and support them, because the Yemeni people are now directly facing the United States, the UK, and the Zionist entity. However, the situation is the exact opposite. We are the ones sympathizing with the Arab and Muslim people. Because as Yemenis, we are comfortable waging this fight, whatever sacrifices it costs us. And the pain we feel from watching the suffering of the Palestinian people is alleviated by our actions. That is why we have to console the Arab people and sympathize with them, because they are suffering immensely as they watch the crimes committed against Palestine, without being able to do anything about it. And we, of course, thank them for their support for Yemen's decision to defend Gaza. As for the Arab leaders, my message to them is that the wind of change is blowing and will reach them in the future if they don't change their policies. Of course, all the Arab governments sympathize with the Palestinians, but they don't dare move against the Zionist state because they are afraid. But if they don't take action from now on, maybe these winds will reach them. That is why I advise all Arab and Muslim governments to be proactive, because if they remain inactive, they will lose in the long run. There is rage in the Arab and Muslim streets. The resistance in Palestine has broken the barrier of fear and showed the weakness of the Zionist entity. So did Hezbollah and so did Yemen. My message to the protesters and those supporting us in the US and in the UK is to keep going. Our fight is one, whether we are Muslims, Christians, or even Jews, to defeat the gang of Zionist leaders in Washington and London, a gang that has caused a lot of suffering in the world, whether in South Africa, in our region, in East Asia, or even in Europe now, regarding what is happening in Ukraine. Everyone knows that we did not support the Russian intervention in Ukraine, despite the fact that the Ukrainian government had supported the attacks on us and on Gaza, because we differentiate between the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people. Our position is clear. Even though many advise us to declare support of the military operation in Ukraine, that said, we hold the Zionist leaders in Washington and London responsible for the tragedy occurring in Ukraine, a tragedy that impacts all, including the Christians, even the Jews who were gathered and sent to become settlers in Palestine. They are partially guilty while being partially victims, because they've been placed at the front as fodder. We all saw the Palestinian lady and the Jewish settler from New York, where she asked him, "Yaakov, you know that this is not your house." And he responds candidly, "If I leave this house, another will come." And truly the Zionist leadership in Washington and London would find someone to replace Yaakov if he were to ever return to New York. And when she said to him, "You are sealing my house," he responds, "If I don't seal it, someone else will." The Zionist leadership in Washington and London will take care of it. Therefore, that Jewish settler, as well as being guilty of stealing what's not his, is also a victim. He could one day turn into a Netanyahu, and if he doesn't, his kids will. That said, we emphasize that our actions are moral ones. If any group had suffered what the Palestinians have suffered, even if they weren't Arabs or Muslims, we would act the same way.
Mohammed Al-Bukhaiti, Senior Political Officer and Spokesman for the Ansarallah movement in Yemen. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective with us at the Grayzone.
Thank you.